We are taking a look at the book of 2 Kings again. We've been here once in this study series, and we have two verses that we're going to look at in today's lesson study. And she said, "As the Lord thy God liveth, I have not a cake, but a handful of meal in a barrel, and a little oil in a cruse. And behold, I am gathering 2 sticks that I may go in and dress it for me and my son, that we may eat it and die." This is a familiar story, but I want to perhaps dig out some unfamiliar details in this story. Overall, our theme for today is making plans to live and not die. Now, I want to just make you look at that for a moment. Making plans to live and not die. We started this series. This is the culmination of a 5-week study on this thought life plan, that God has a plan for our life, that we need to understand his plan for our life. Life is not arbitrary. Life is a planned event. Very first thing that we learn, and this should already be in your life plan notes. Number 1, plan to live. God's plan for us is to live. Number 2, we learned that life has options. So you need to discover your options, your alternatives inside of God's will, inside of God's plan for your life. Number 3, you need to make sure, don't make the mistake of failing to live right now, to rise up and to live right now. You need to rise up inside of your circumstance, inside of the place where you might be challenged, and live inside that moment, no matter how challenging it might be. And then lastly, we learned that we have to be facing the right direction in order to have life. So I want to make sure you should have this in your notes. Number 1, plan to live. That's number 1. That's God's intent for you. That's what's on his life plan. He intends for you to live. That's the most important. That's the most important, so important. I want us to end with our focus on that again. This story, very familiar story, familiar conversation between Elijah, the prophet, and an unnamed woman who has a son. The general story is that the prophet himself is hungry. He's traveling, and he comes upon this woman that God sends him to for provision. So, first footnote there is Elijah himself is a person in need. God sends him specifically to to the home of this woman, only to find that, in her opinion, she is without food, without provision. So God sends Elijah to a place that is empty, at least from the woman's point of view, a place that has little or next to nothing to provide. In the story in general, what we usually rehearse here is how Elijah inspires her to take what she has and to make a cake and to give it to him first. And then the prophet blesses her, and she lives with abundance thereafter. Great story. But here's some of the details that we don't normally consider. In our study, we are learning, and we have established the first thing on God's life plan for us is for us to plan to live. That's his number 1 thing. This story, what intrigues me is that this woman makes a plan not to live. She's planning not to live. Wait a minute. How do you do that? How do you plan not to have life?